Everybody, I want to welcome our first guest, Zack Minasian, to the Captain's Table. This is David Benezra.
And I'm Nick Garinger.
We're your hosts. And just briefly, because we're going to have Zack do most of the talking, Zack is a lifelong baseball man, spent 22 years, among other things, with the Texas Rangers. And he has a book out called Lasorda University, and from that title, you know it's going to be chock full of good stories, and it is a baseball family, and we're going to get to that also. So, again, welcome to you, Zack. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our special pleasure.
Inaugural show, right?
Inaugural show. You are the first guest.
Wow.
And,
Absolutely.
And
I'm honored.
I think Nick and I we both like sports history. And you provide a lot of sports history. So, you're one of the best guests we could have to debut.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I fit the bill.
We'll be scheduling you for the 10-year reunion, by the
way. You more than fit. We could probably go 2 or 3 shows instead of an hour.
Yeah.
But correct me anywhere that I'm wrong. You're currently living in the Chicago area. And actually, and we're going to get to your dad and everything, but I was reading a little bit about you besides our talk, and it said that, it was longtime Major Leaguer Bobby Valentine who was actually responsible for getting you to leave your packaging business in Chicago. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's how it went. I was in... Actually was going to go down and work in the Dominican in the winter of 73. And I stopped in Chicago to visit my dad and my mother, who were split up, but both living in Chicago at the time. So I stopped to visit, and I ended up meeting my wife, and I never left Chicago, did not go to the Dominican that winter. And I would say that it's lasted because this July will be 49 years of marriage. So,
wow,
it all worked out. We met, I stayed, we married, I worked, we started having kids. But then I got that call from Bobby, who had gone down to Texas in 1986 to manage. And he said, hey, you want to think about coming down here? The visiting clubhouse job is open. And of course, I was Bobby's clubby in 1968, which is what.
Yeah, let's go back to there for a little bit. So, of course, we talked, and you told me your father worked at, I think it was the Ambassador Hotel in LA. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you got to know a lot of the Dodger people. And due to that, when a young manager, a young Tommy Lasorda, was put in charge of the Dodgers rookie league farm team, which happened to move from Pocatello, Idaho to Ogden, Utah. In 1968, he asked a 16-year-old kid named Zack Minasian if he wanted to come out there and be in charge of the clubhouse. Do I have that right?
That's right. Let me just interject here. 66, 65, they were in Pocatello. 66, they decided to move the affiliate to Ogden. Mm-hmm. And 66, I was 13. And Tommy asked me that first year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Would I come to Ogden with him? So I wrote about the 68 team simply because there were so many good players, so many good stories from that season that's the team I picked. But I was in Ogden in 66, 67, and 68. And it was a summer job for me while I was still in high school, living in Burbank, California. So,
and you must have made quite an impression on Bobby Valentine, who himself was a very young player at that time.
Well, the guys in the rookie league are all guys that just signed, whether it be right out of high school, which most of them were, which would make them 17 or 18 years old. And then a few guys back then, it's reverse now. Back then, you drafted high school kids and not as many college guys, and now it's the reverse.
So you had a lot of big brothers.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I was a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old with guys that were at least a couple years older. But I'll tell you what, working for Tommy gave you a lot of confidence that you could do the job and that you had to be forceful at times. And as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, I did that. And so that, I think, kind of set me on my path to becoming a major league equipment guy.
Now, although you jumped at the opportunity to do this, let's go to when you're 13. So you're 13 years old. Tommy Lasorda asked you to do that, but are you thinking, like most 13-year-olds, oh, this would be a cool thing to do for 3 months, hang out with the ball players and whatever? Or were you thinking, boy, this is something I would really like to do, because you didn't go directly from this. You did go and wind up in the packaging business for a while. So if you can remember, what was your mindset 13 through 16? Were you thinking this could be a career or just a fun thing?
Well, I'll tell you, I wrote in the book in reference to 66. I thought I was the only 13-year-old in the world doing what I was doing, and that actually went through my mind, and it was like being in a dream. It was, I don't know how to, I tried to describe it in the book, but I don't know that I did that great a job, because it's just difficult to describe what that was like. You were, as with the players, there were so many firsts for me. I mean, I was staying in a hotel. I had a lot of responsibility. Tommy relied on me. He really didn't have any help. It was obvious that by then, the year or two that he knew me and I knew him, he believed that I could do this job with him as my tutor. Mm-hmm. And, I learned each year and got better. And by the time the 68 team rolled around, I was a 3-year veteran. So I learned a lot. I learned how to run a clubhouse. I learned how to take care of ball players, which is kind of a unique job. And although I will say at the time, I had no clue that I would end up being an equipment guy in the major leagues and doing it for a career. But that's the way it worked.
And let me ask you this. Now, this is not about, we're not, TMZ, but, did you get any funny requests from the players? Go out and get me this kid or whatever. I mean,
No, back then they were just happy to be there. And
Gotcha.
I enjoyed the minor leagues. I mean, and I was a big league clubhouse guy for a long time, and I was proud of that. And it was, to me, it was I always felt it was an integral part of what went on around there day in and day out. Without a clubby, you're in trouble. So I always felt, that I was proud of what our job was, what I did. I tried to convey that to the other guys in our meetings and with our association that we have as equipment guys. Be proud. You're here not picking up jocks. You're here to run this clubhouse, to be the first guy in, to be the first guy out, or last guy out. You're the gatekeeper. You're watching the equipment. You're responsible for millions of dollars really in equipment and millions of dollars in ball players. So, it's not a joke.
Right.
And
at the minor league level, did the Dodgers do anything post game as far as setting out some sort of a spread for the guys? No.
Well, not at that level.
Yeah.
When you got to AAA, things were different. AA was different, but we were the lowest of the low. We had no help. He had no coaches. There was no trainer. I tell a story in the book. We worked out for 10 days before the season started, and one guy got a little banged up, and he came in after the first day or two looking for Tommy, and he said, "Hey, Coach Lasorda." He hated to be called coach, so that was a bad move. But he came in and said, "Hey, Coach Lasorda, my ankle's a little sore. Where's the whirlpool?" And Tommy said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Where's the whirlpool?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, hold on. Follow me." So the kid followed him to the back, and he took him into the latrine, and he kicked open the door with his foot, and he said, "See that?" And he pointed to the toilet, and he said, "Stick your foot in there and flush it." That's the whirlpool. So
Tommy was quite a character, of course.
We didn't have much of anything. When I tell you that, believe me, the ballpark, even though it was home, it was brutal. It was not the greatest. Playing field was okay, but it was laid out to be right in the sun. And, but it was, these guys they were in heaven, man. I can't explain to you how lucky they are that for first-year players that signed and were sent somewhere, how lucky they were to be sent to Tommy Lasorda.
Yeah, and it was all baseball, because there can't be a lot to do at 18, 19 years old in Ogden, Utah.
That's right. That's all we did. And I wrote the synopsis on the back of the book, explains how 1968, the world was in a turmoil.
Yeah.
There was Vietnam, assassinations,
Right.
The convention riots, all kinds of things going on. We went to the moon the next year. I mean, Woodstock, you name it. The world was in an upheaval of protest and unrest and those kinds of things. And here we were, this band of 25, 17, 18, 19-year-olds banded together to play baseball, first time away from home, with absolutely no idea of what was going on around us in the world at the time. So it was a very unique situation being, and very impactful on all of us.
And you were on a very unique around a very unique team, because as we talked, you mentioned the draft to boost the players on the Dodgers Rookie League team wound up seeing, I think you said, 16 of those guys becoming major
16.
leaguers.
That's exactly right.
And in fact, supplied is a record?
I think it's an unprecedented record. If I'm not mistaken, nobody's come close to that. I mean, if you draft, and they had 90 rounds back then or more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about a lot of players, but to draft 16 guys that ended up, and I mean good players. We had 6 on our club. Daytona that year had another 6 that were all drafted together. And Say, Lopes, Ferguson, Jeff Zahn, Doyle Alexander, they were all on another team, but were all drafted the same year. So that 68 draft really solidified the Dodger lineup for the next almost 20 years.
Well, you could say it was kismet. You had perfect timing, and so did Tommy coming into it at that time, because he also...
Yeah.
Not only did he help those kids be better players and become future major leaguers, but he developed those relationships with them. And then later on, he got to manage a lot of them at the big time level.
Exactly right. He took them all with him. And it was like, and it was things they talked about in Ogden. We'll be together. He was very positive. Your address is going to be Dodger Stadium. I mean, he would let these guys know what they could do, where they could go if they worked hard. And they believed it. And I'll be damned if that didn't happen. And he managed Lopes, Say, Garvey, all of them.
Yeah, Billy Russell, Steve Yeager, you said. Yeah, all those guys. Yeah.
So, amazing guy. He really was. And the book goes into that. It's a great book. Anybody wants a nice, easy read and some funny things about Tommy. And remember now, this is his 4th year of managing at the lowest level in professional baseball.
Okay, well, I want to talk about your family, and then we'll take a quick break. But make sure I have this correct, because you have a large family. So you have 4 sons, and the oldest son, Rudy, is a lawyer. And he has his own law firm in Chicago, which I read is practicing transactional law, specializing in real estate and estate planning.
Exactly right.
So, like I think I told you the other day, I can't help it. This is how I think, because I'm in sports too. So he's the smart guy who decided, I'm going to leave baseball to my brothers. I'm going to go out and make the money, change the world, and exactly. Your second oldest, Perry, is the current GM of the Los Angeles Angels.
That's right.
Okay. Your third, I'm sorry, boy, I switched that up somehow. Okay, I skipped. But the third oldest, Calvin, is currently the director of Clubhouse and equipment for the Atlanta Braves. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And your youngest son, so Perry is actually the second oldest. Your youngest son,
Second, right.
Zach Jr., is currently the vice president of scouting with the San Francisco Giants.
Yep.
So I would say,
President and pro scouting director.
okay.
Yep.
So I would say 3 out of 4 in the baseball biz is a tremendous batting average. So, let's not worry about Rudy being the black sheep. Let's look at the 750 batting average.
Well, I can tell you, when they have a problem, who do you think they call?
Okay. Well, it's good to have a lawyer in the family.
That's exactly right. When there's a problem, they call the smart guy in the family. That's the way that it works. So, it all worked out.
Well, let's just take a quick moment, and we're going to come back with our guest, Zack Minasian, and I want to mention that he has the book out called Lasorda University, and he also has a website called lasordauniversity.com. The book can be purchased on that site and also on Amazon in either hardcover or paperback for $21.95. In addition, you can get it as an ebook, and there is a premium hardcover edition offered by Lulu. And any book purchased can also be autographed by Zack if requested. So again, that's Lasorda University, and the website is lasordauniversity.com.
Let me mention this one thing. I mentioned I'm in Phoenix.
Right.
I'm going to Camelback Ranch for 2 dates, the first one being tomorrow and the next one being Friday, and I'll be in the concourse there at a little table selling and hopefully signing some books for any of the fans that are at the Dodger games on those 2 dates. So any of your listeners out there, I don't know when this will be broadcast, but when it is, if I'm still, probably the 10th, and I'm in Arizona, come on out and see us.
That sounds great. I can't imagine a better experience because you definitely, you have the experience, but it's just, the stories are phenomenal, and all these links, I mean, it's like, it's all interwoven, and that's before we even get to all your sons are in baseball, but just, let's go back now to the beginning. So you said your father worked at the Ambassador and got to know many of the Dodger people, but give me some more details about that.
Well, Tommy, back then, Buzzy Bavasi, of course, Walter O'Malley owned the team.
Bavasi was the general manager for people who may not know that.
That's right.
Okay.
At the time, Buzzy was the GM, and Fresco Thompson was there, who was like second in command. And
in fact, I think he was known as the Veep, I think was his nickname. Yeah.
And Tommy just retired in '62. And they decided they wanted to bring him out to Los Angeles. And I want to say they decided that as a group to bring him out to L.A. and have him scout in the Southern California area, which was a premier area. I mean, you're going to get your better players in most cases from the warm weather areas. And back then, USC was a hotbed for college baseball. And there was just a lot of baseball being played in California. So it was a great place to be assigned a scouting area, particularly for a beginner, as Tommy was at that time. So he came along with Al Campanis one day, and they showed up at the Ambassador. And from that moment on, my dad and Tommy just hit it off. They were like brothers. They were, they traveled together. They went everywhere together. And thus, my path to Ogden and really into baseball began at that very moment. And so that's why in the book, I use the Ambassador as the starting place for the story and where it all began. And I'm going to jump off the subject a little bit, but I was with my son Perry the other day here, and he's got his minor league director was a kid that I hired as a clubhouse guy in Texas. And he worked for me, and he was one of the best employees I ever hired. and he wanted to get in baseball operations, and I finally convinced the front office to hire him, and he moved on and he did some work for St. Louis, and now he's reunited with Perry, and they're both here in Arizona, and they're working together, and it's terrific. He's a great kid, Joey Probinski, and Joey's mom was here the other day, and she came up to me, and she introduced me to her friend as the first guy to hire Joey and the first guy to give him an opportunity to work in baseball. And I looked at her and I said, that's funny. I just wrote a book and it's about exactly that. Me getting my first opportunity and the road that carved out for not only me, but my boys and for guys like Joey, who there would be no Joey if there wasn't a Tommy Lasorda. So it's a long line of happenings that we've just been so blessed and so fortunate to be a part of that it's been great.
See, and I believe those types of things sort of stick in our subconscious a little bit. So it's not even that you're consciously thinking about a particular kid and I got to do something for him. It's just something that just is organic, right? It's just, it's like, I like this kid. He's a great worker. He tells me he wants to do this. Okay, let me help him.
Yeah.
You know?
He's serious. And I've hired lots of kids, believe me, over the years. And when I say kids, I mean high school seniors, college, freshmen. Those were the guys working in the clubhouse.
Yeah, no more 13 or 14-year-olds, right?
No. Well, no. Not unless they're your kids and you make them work in there. That's not the only way.
Now, Tommy was known for having some very colorful language as well. So let's talk about that as a young kid growing up and being around Tommy Lasorda at the time and being that character. Was he very colorful around you, or was he a father figure for you?
No, he was a father figure that was colorful. How does that sound?
Sounds very
Yeah, he didn't hold back that. He was, again, I point to the book. I write about his 12-year-old nephew that came to Ogden for a visit, and the kid said he wrote in there, the only time I was around my uncle when I was around my dad and his brothers and his mom and his dad, and he was on his best behavior, and I never heard him swear. And I showed up in Ogden, and I sat in the dugout during the first game, the first day I was there, and I heard language I couldn't believe. And this was a 12-year-old. So he didn't hold back. But I learned from that. I learned there's a right way to talk. There's a wrong way to talk. There's certain times that you might use that language depending on, what you're doing. And that's just the way I, was nurtured in that environment. I never worried about my kids. I know I felt they knew right from wrong, and Lee Smith would show them dirty magazines all the time. And the players would laugh, how can you let your kids, I thought about it. I didn't just blow it off, but I think it was a great place for them to grow up. 3 of them did their homework. They're executives in every sense of the word for 3 major league clubs. So, I mean, I didn't do it. I kicked the door open a little and they did the work to get to where they're at. So
I think that was a great question by Nick, because that also jarred my memory. And you probably remember this guy. There was a famous on-air personality called Jim Healy, and he would run clips of things. And there was that infamous Lasorda clip where, of course, the whole thing was bleeped, but it was like bleep, bleep. Bleep, 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 bleep. You said bleep, 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 bleep.
I believe the quote was, he couldn't hit water falling out of a freaking boat.
Yeah. And it was amazing how many F-bombs he was able to put in there in something like 20 seconds. I mean, it was had to be an all-time record.
He was the best. He could swear with anybody. He did it with a purpose. And he did not swear in front of women. Just when he had you in a meeting, or if you were a reporter and you aggravated him, then you might get it. But other than that, that was his, again, a form of motivation for him.
I want to go just a hair off topic since we're talking about Tommy, and I'm just curious if you know. I don't know, unless Nick knows. So he had a good relationship, a good friendship, a real friendship with Frank Sinatra. How far back did that go? Did he know Sinatra when he was actually a baseball player before he became the manager of the Dodgers, or what was the deal with that? It's not just that they were Italians.
Yeah, well, Tommy loved being Italian, and if you were Italian, you were up there on his list. Obviously, the most well-known Italian in the world, it's probably Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to guess, because in answer to your question, I don't know when that actually started, but my guess is it would have been 1976 and on. Only because, that's when he got to Hollywood. That's when it became, he became a little bit of a different Tommy Lasorda because he had to adapt to that.
But, he was such a genuine character that I like to picture it this way, that he's introduced to Sinatra and intentionally he says something like, "You're Frank Sinatra? You're fucking so fucking small. Are you fucking kidding me? You're Frank Sinatra? Who the fuck are you? You got to be the Frank Sinatra imposter." He probably said something that made Sinatra laugh after he thought about it for a second. Like, who is this guy would have the balls to say something to me? So he's real.
Right.
And that was the sense from reading about it and knowing a few people, twice removed who knew them, that I guess Frank really liked the fact that Tommy didn't put him on a pedestal or treat him like another, whatever. Yeah. Just like, we're just two Italian guys having a good time talking about whatever, having a few drinks.
Well, I think that, for the most part, I think that's true. But he was still the chairman of the board. He didn't screw with Sinatra.
Yeah.
I don't care who you were. Keep that in mind.
They had a lot of celebrities. This is before, it was popular.
In and out of there. Burt Reynolds, I do a little PowerPoint thing with the book. I put a few pictures in there that I didn't use, but he had them in there every night.
Because I remember the Dodgers would have, I think it was, it might have been a 1 inning, but I want to say it was a 3 inning game where they have the Hollywood stars once a year would come out and play baseball. And and big stars, not just people hoping to get their name out there because they're down or their show got canceled. And they'd have a lot of fun out there running around at Dodger Stadium for a couple of innings type of a deal. And, of course, the crowd loved it. I mean, this is a Hollywood town, even whether you're in Pasadena or Santa Monica, it's a Hollywood town. So,
you got it.
Yeah, those were interesting times.
Those were great days. They were, L.A. was really, and the 60s was just a crazy decade. So, I'm that age, and so I grew up during that period. The Dodgers were just a terrific club. Koufax was superhuman. Maury Wills was my favorite position player. I'm pushing to get him in the Hall of Fame any way that I can because I believe he belongs there. He was a game changer for sure. And, he led a team that had very little hitting, very little offense. And they had Koufax and Drysdale and a pretty good bullpen, even though they didn't use the bullpen like they do today. But they had a couple guys that could come in and shut the other team down. So their pitching was phenomenal. They won. Obviously, they won in 59, but they lost a playoff in 62, or they'd have gone to the World Series. They won in 63. They had an off year in 64. They won in 65. They won in 66. They didn't start their tailspin until after 66. Koufax retired. Then Drysdale retired. Then Wills was traded. But those, from beginning through 66, they were the premier baseball team.
Yeah, now tell me, because I can't remember. We talked about this. There was a particular reason Wills was traded.
Yeah, he skipped part of the Japan trip. They had played in the World Series, and in defense of Maury, he was probably dead tired It was after they got swept by the Yankees, I believe. I mean, by the Orioles in '66. And the trip started, and that was a big thing with the Dodgers. They always made an Asian trip, and it was my understanding Buzzy was unhappy. And this is all hearsay. I don't know if this happened or not. I mean, this is just stories that have come over the years that Buzzy got upset and traded Morey to the Pirates, and we got Bob Bailey, who did nothing, and somebody else that did nothing. And eventually Morey came back and finished out his career in L.A. And he was just he was the smartest player I ever saw. I would go in the locker room as a kid with my dad, and he would cut the tails off of his jersey so they wouldn't hang too low on his legs. Instead of saying, well, I'll cover my legs up and I'll worry about not damaging my legs, he would crop his tops and so it wouldn't impede his speed, you know. So he was more concerned about that than he was about his body. And he stole 104 bases that year. So to me, he was the guy that paved the way for the Ricky Hendersons and Lou Brocks and Vince Coleman's and those guys. And they really have Morey to thank for that. And he was just a terrific player. He played 7-8 years in the minor leagues. He had the determination just to bang away at it, and, you know, made himself into a switch hitter, made himself into a good defensive player. He always had a good arm.
Yeah, because I think, didn't he come up to the Dodgers in '59, I think?
59, he came up, played in the World Series, and took the job over and never gave it up. Yeah, I mean, he was the players leaned on him. I was there. I mean, I saw it, and he kept players that could get a little lackadaisical, like Willie Davis or one of those guys, and give them a little kick in the butt and say, you know, we need to do it this way, or we don't do it that way, or, you know, position them in the outfield here or there like a captain would do, you know. And he was our Derek Jeter in those times. And there were some pretty good shortstops around. Dick Grote and, you know, some other guys during Aparicio, during that decade, they were pretty good. And Aparicio's in the Hall of Fame, and I'm happy he is. But I think Morey certainly deserves that consideration.
Yeah, I remember Aparicio, and he was a pretty good player. But you're right to your point. If Louis Aparicio isn't, how come Maurice Morning Wills isn't in?
You got it. It's a good question. It's a good question, and he played his ass off every game. He gave up his body, and he just, you know, he did what it took to win, and he led a team, like I said, that offensively he'd get a walk or get a hit, he'd steal a base, he'd get to third, a sac fly, it'd bring him home. We'd scratch out a run or two and win the ball game.
Yeah,
you can't win 2 or 3 World Series in a decade, you know, by accident.
Oh, an awful lot of 2-1 and 3-2 games, and with some, and sometimes a 4-3 game. Whoa, we got 4 runs. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a question about, you know, working for Bobby Valentine, but we're going to take another quick break. And again, if somebody's just joining us, we are talking with Zack Minasian. And Zack has a book out, a fascinating book called Lasorda University, which obviously is going to tell you an awful lot of information about Tommy Lasorda, the younger Tommy Lasorda. And that book can be purchased on that website and also on Amazon in either hardcover or paperback for $21.95. In addition, you can get it as an ebook, and there is a premium hardcover edition offered by Lulu. And any book that's purchased can also be autographed by Zack if requested. So think about that. That's a book that you want to have. It's like living history. It just sounds so vivid. We're talking with Zack right now and getting all these stories. And I want to get a copy of myself. So, Zack, we're back. I want to say, so you get this opportunity to work with Bobby Valentine, and you must have enjoyed it, obviously. You were 22 years in Texas. that had to be, even though you weren't young by the time you took that job. I mean, you were still young in terms of an adult,
Right.
but
Yeah, I was in my early 30s.
yeah, but that's a huge culture change going out to Texas. And also, did you ever really think, yeah, I want to do this, but God, it would be wonderful to do it in my hometown of LA for Tommy Lasorda type of a thing. So, again, even though you had that relationship with Bobby Valentine, when he said he's responsible for getting you leave the packaging business, now how did he persuade you to do that?
He didn't really have to. There wasn't much persuading. I mean, I love the game, even though I got married and I had kids and I was working and, I wasn't in baseball. My heart was in it. And I felt like when the opportunity came up, because it's a very tough job to get. There's only, 30 of them in the world. So if you have one, you grab it and you try to hang on to it and you do the best you can. So you do hang on to it. And what's even better is if you know what the hell you're doing. So
well, and it's great that your wife was all for that. I mean, obviously that could be a big thing.
It took a little convincing. My in-laws were crying and she was crying, and I said it. I believe that it's an opportunity, and I think it's something we have to do.
Well, didn't you just tell her no more Chicago winters, honey?
I tried that, didn't work, but it was good. It was good. Then funny part. Fast forward 25 years, and when I left Texas to come home, she was crying. She didn't want to leave Texas. So you figure it. She cried when we left to go there, and she cried when we left to leave there.
So you had obviously, of course, you had kids already before you went to Texas.
Yes.
They had to be fairly young, so that was probably, timing-wise, was probably better because, of course, as they get older, they're making more friends. It would be even tougher. Right. So you had perfect timing in choosing to do this. So they probably didn't realize they were missing anything as far as leaving for Chicago to Texas. To them, it was probably just an adventure.
It was like an adventure, yeah. And we were going for baseball. I got 4 sons, and they were jacked up, I think, but they were also grew up around their grandparents and their cousins and their aunts and uncles and family friends, and so it was a difficult move for them. I bought the house. I went down there. My wife refused to come down there, and I said, well, okay, well, I'm going to buy the house without you seeing it, and I bought a home. And but it didn't take long for the kids to grow up, and they acclimated themselves to the weather and to school but mainly to the clubhouse, because every day after school, year after year, game after game, there they were, and they would work till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning and come home and get a few hours of sleep and get up and go to school and do the same drill all over again.
So you were in the Arlington area?
I lived in the Arlington area. My oldest Rudy was about 10 or 11 at the time, and they're all about 2 years apart. So Rudy was 10, Perry was 8, Calvin was 6, Zach was 4. And
when did your wife come around like, okay, you know what? This could be a pretty good thing. We got wide open spaces here. It's a nice place for the kids.
It didn't take long. We got involved with the team. She started going to games, and the little ones were too small, but I brought Rudy in and Perry in the beginning, and I want to be sure it was okay with the players. I want them to feel comfortable with them around, but I also wanted them to work and experience what I experienced as a 13-year-old. I did it at a different level, but it was the same idea. And I felt it was healthy for me, and I thought it'd be healthy for them. And Rudy, as a 10-year-old, I'm telling you, he took on a lot of responsibility. I mean, he would help in the laundry room. He would help get the batting practice. We would put fruit out and things like that, and he would help cut the fruit and did a lot of things with the food service that we would have. And one thing I'll say about my tenure in Texas, I worked with some great GMs, with Tom Grieve and Doug Melvin. We had the Bush group as an ownership group who they were terrific. So I enjoyed my time there. And you asked me about, didn't I want to be a Dodger? Yeah, probably. If I had my druthers, I could have said, I want the equipment job in LA, but the jobs are so tough to get that when you're offered one, if you really want to do it, you take it. So I took the visiting job, and I did the visitors for 7 years, and I had the best time of my life. It was so much better than being the home guy. There was no comparison.
Now, I'm certain that all your sons enjoyed the job, but obviously since 3 went on to baseball careers, 3 loved the job. So did any of your kids at some point, 14, 15, 17, 18, what have you, come to you and say, hey, Dad, I think I want to do this for a career type of a thing?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I think all 3 of them did.
So you weren't surprised?
No, I wasn't. No, and I never pushed them. I never made them play baseball, but they did. I never made a big deal out of it, But the one thing that I did do was I had them with me in the clubhouse every day. And most parents don't have that, fathers in particular, don't have that opportunity. So, again, I go back to saying I just was, it was great. The wheel went round. I was there. I got lucky. I was blessed. You could say a million things, but, being able to bring them into the clubhouse for 20-some years now, every day was a blessing, and it paved the way for them to understand the game, the players, the job, and whether or not they wanted to stay in it. And then they made their own decision.
Now, Zach, it looks like Zach is on.
Rudy had a little different path.
Yeah.
Rudy wanted to go back home. He enjoyed Chicago. He missed his family. I respected that. He wanted to go to DePaul, which he did. Finished out his college career and then went to John Marshall Law School. So his was a different path, but I would go out on a limb and say his heart was still in the game as well, because he grew up just like all the rest.
Now it looks like from his title that Zach Jr. is on a career path to be a GM if he's interested in pursuing upper management like that.
He is.
So
yeah, I think that if there's a hiring guy out there, you couldn't do better, because he's a hardworking guy and he understands the game, and he's different than Perry. He a little more analytic, a little more I won't say detail oriented, but maybe pays a little more attention to that. Perry's a little more of a gut. I got a gut feeling.
I feel. Yeah.
So he's got a little, but Perry's got a little special feel for the game, boy. I knew that since he was in. I told his high school coach that. I said, this kid is good. He knows the game, and he knows what he's doing. You got to give him the opportunity to do it, though, and that's up to his, the people that own the team.
So that's a pending record. If you have 2 sons that are GMs, I'm sure there's other father-son GM teams, but I can't recall a father with 2 sons becoming GMs.
Yeah, you know who did that? Bavazis.
He had 1 son, right, that did that.
Bavazzi had 2 GM sons.
Wow.
One was the GM in Toronto, one was a GM in Anaheim, and he was a GM himself. So.
Oh,
and then he was also the president of a team, the San Diego Padres,
right?
Which his older son, Peter O'Malley, Peter Bavazzi, was for Toronto. He was the GM and then the president.
Well, I got to blame Buzzy for one thing, though. Although he didn't come up with them, why he didn't change those horrible colors that the Padres had, the brown and yellow. It's like, it drove me crazy. It's like a bad hot dog.
It might have been a Ray Kroc thing. That was the yellow mustard in his burgers.
Oh. So, yeah, so much history. And, I know you're living in Chicago, but obviously you get out and you catch an Angels game and you spend some time with Perry, because I'm sure you love to still watch games when you come out and see your boys. So you probably have a busy travel schedule.
I do. I don't watch as many games, although I may start. If these games finish 45 minutes faster, then that's good enough for me. I may start watching again, but I really only watch the Giants, the Braves, and the Angels and check the standings and, see what's going on with them. I've really become much less of a fan. I think that's Major League Baseball's problem, is how they're going to replace fans like myself, because we're their base and we're all getting old. So speeding the game up, I think, is certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah, if you could make every game, say, 2.5 hours instead of 3 plus, I think that helps. Right. I tell you, it's interesting you talk about that, because my dad, of course, introduced me to baseball, and he'd get tickets and he'd take me to a game. And I enjoyed the thing about baseball, even though I was a kid and I was interested in the game and I knew the Dodger players, who the best guys were. It was really, although I couldn't verbalize this at the time, I really just liked being out with my dad somewhere, and we're sharing a hot dog, and the vendors could throw peanuts in those days. There was no lawsuit about you might hit somebody. And so it was that shared time. But when I watch baseball on TV, I've always had a difficult time watching baseball. It's just tough to watch it that way. But in person, you're at the park, and it's just a nice whole experience. It's like you're almost like you're in a park, a real park, but you're in the city, and you're with, whether it's a friend or it's your dad or your mom, whatever. And so it's a great family activity to hang out. That's why I could never understand people, especially in LA anyways, getting up at the 7th inning stretch and leaving early, just to beat traffic. Are you kidding me?
I think the joy of going to a Dodger game back then was actually going with your family, and it was so inexpensive to do. Your fondest memories, mine at least as a kid, was grabbing my first Dodger dog and eating the malt, and having the ability to watch that game and hoping that foul ball would come my way and I might be able to catch it. So
absolutely,
it seemed like baseball was conducive to family, and obviously you brought your kids up in that environment, and it sounds like it was a labor of love.
It was, and probably selfish of me to, why are you keeping the kids out so late, and why do they have to work, and all these comments, and what if they pick up bad language and all those things, and it just, to me, the good of that experience far outweighed the bad. And so I thought, I'm in a position to do this, so I'm going to do it, and that's how it all worked, and I wanted him there. And people have asked me, when Perry got his job, they said, they went back on the clubhouse stuff, and he was a bat boy and he worked in the clubhouse, and they would say, well, did you need him in there to work? Well, of course not. They were 12 years old, and I had a staff of 6, 7, 8 guys. So I had workers. So it wasn't that I needed them to work. It was that I wanted them there, because I felt like the experience they would get from that would be nothing like they could ever,
Well, it's a great blend, right? I mean, they're still kids, and they're finding it all fun as kids, but at the same time, like you say, they're learning how to work, how to act around adults, how to, be responsible. If you're given a task, do it, and do it to the best of your ability. Don't just do it, type of a thing. Right. So they learned all those things for the future. And so, look, you have 2 executives, you have a lawyer, and the other kid is what did you say? The clubhouse director?
He's a clubhouse rat like his dad.
There you go.
So
there you go.
He was with me the longest. He was my assistant the longest. He learned the trade, and he had to start when I left Texas. Nobody did him any favors. He went and started in the Nationals, Washington National system, and he took over their whole minor league system and took care of all of the affiliates. And I was very proud of him because he didn't have me to lean on. And although I went with him initially, helped them set up down there. They were in Florida and Vieira, and they liked him. Washington called him up to the big leagues right away, wanted him to work in the major league clubhouse and be an assistant there, and he did that. He won a World Series in 2019 with Washington, and when the job opened up in Atlanta, he got a call from the Atlanta GM. By then, Perry had left Atlanta and joined the Angels, and he got a call from Alex Anthopoulos from the Braves, and who told him that the home clubhouse job was open. Would he be interested in leaving Washington and coming to Atlanta, which he did, and he won another World Series in 2021. So Calvin's got 2 World Series rings. One he gave to me, but he's got 2 that none of the rest of us have even sniffed. So the rest of us haven't come close to a World Series ring yet. So he's done 2 things as an equipment guy that the so-called executives in my family haven't done. So that's where Calvin's one up on him.
Do you think we're going to see another generation of Minasians, grandchildren, come into the business?
Well, I've got. There's so many gals coming in the game now. I've got 4 granddaughters and 3 grandsons. I cannot imagine my grandsons not being in the clubhouse, particularly Calvin's son, because again, that's where he is and that's his game. So I would imagine, and his name is Archie. So I would think that if any of them go, Archie for sure will go. But we'll see. You never know. Okay. Maybe one of the gals. She might be a GM someday. We'll see.
Hey, I want to go back in time. You mentioned, of course, the turbulence of the times, 1968. All sorts of things were happening. Now, one thing that happened that was close to home would be RFK and, unfortunately, his assassination, which was at the Ambassador Hotel.
Yep.
Can you tell me something about that whole thing?
Yeah, I touch on it in the book. My dad was the banquet and catering manager there, so any events that went on in the ballrooms and all that, they were always there. He and a couple other guys that ran the banquet and catering department at the hotel there. And it was an iconic hotel. I mean, something was going on there every day. And, of course, Robert Kennedy's headquarters were there. They had an event in the ballroom that night waiting for the election results. When the results came in and Kennedy had won the primary in California, he gave a speech to that full, crowded ballroom, and he left the stage and walked back through a side door and into the kitchen, and was going to go do some interviews. And he went through the kitchen, and as he was doing that, he was greeting a lot of the kitchen staff, the busboys, the waitresses, the cooks. They were all around. And my dad was on his left rear, and Carl Euchre, my dad's partner in the catering end of it, was on the right side of the senator. And the crowd was behind them. Rosie Greer, Rayford Johnson, all the names you've heard over the years. They were all kind of behind, just walking, following the senator. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out jumped the gunman. And he was on the right side of Kennedy, and of course, shot not only Kennedy, but 6 other people. And I write about that in the book. My dad testified at the grand jury about what happened that night. And it was very upsetting to him. He never really spoke about it. I watched it all unfold on TV and as a 16-year-old, and knew that extra people had been shot and wasn't sure whether it was him or not. And I waited 4 hours that night till I got a call from him saying he was fine and that he was at the Rampart police station giving his statement to the authorities. So he was there in the thick of it. I mentioned he testified. That's all free for public viewing. So my son looked it up, and I actually was able to read all of his testimony. A lot of it disagreed with some of the things that were said. A lot of people disagree to what happened there. You know, a lot of controversy over that, as was the JFK deal as well. So,
well, some people, there's a lot of people don't believe that Sirhan B. Sirhan actually was the one that shot him, that shot RFK.
A lot of speculation that there was more than one gun in that room fired that night, and that the police covered it up. And they destroyed ceiling tiles, and they dug bullets out of walls, and they didn't do their due diligence. They had their shooter. Somebody grabbed him with the gun in his hand, and that was good enough for them, and that was where they were going to leave it. And they kept saying they didn't want another Dallas. They didn't want another Dallas. But ironically, I think it turned into exactly that, another Dallas, where now nobody believes what they say happened, and it's 55 years later. So interesting with my dad, and Tommy believed this because since my dad passed in 1990, we never really talked about it, other than Tommy a couple times had said to me, I know somebody told him they felt he should leave town. They felt he shouldn't stay around Los Angeles any longer.
Wow.
And in 1969, he picked up, just out of the blue, I was a junior in high school, and he said, I'm going to St. Louis to take over a hotel there. And I'm going to run the catering and banquet catering for them and do their parties and weddings and all the things he did at the Ambassador. They had a Trader Vic's there, which was very popular. But St. Louis was no L.A.
Yeah.
And Tom and my dad was an L.A. guy. I mean, and if and when you read the book, you'll read about my dad and the things that he did in L.A. And he moved from Chicago as a young man, moved his elderly parents out there. It was like, go west, young man with him. He was a Hollywood, Los Angeles guy. So for him to leave was very strange. And nobody can figure it out. He's gone now, and me being as dumb as I am, never really pressed him on it. But I'm thinking about it a lot now. What really went on in that kitchen? What really happened? And whether or not he was told to leave Los Angeles for his own safety, I don't know. Could be.
Well, before we sign off, I want to say one more time, we have been talking with Zack Minasian, who has made a career out of baseball and now has a family that's making a career out of baseball. And he's written what sounds like a fabulously interesting book because he spent 3 summers with Tommy Lasorda, before Tommy Lasorda was Tommy Lasorda, so to speak, of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the book is called Lasorda University. And he also has a website, lasordauniversity.com. The book can be purchased on Amazon and also on the website, either hardback or paperback, for $21.95. You can get it as an ebook if you want, and there's also a premium hardcover edition offered by Lulu. And Zack will autograph on request any book that you purchase. And like I said, I can't wait to read that book. And I'll be honest with you, Zack, baseball's not my number one sport, but I love that. I love that stuff, and I've loved talking with you and hearing what you have to say, and I want to get all of it. So yeah, I will be getting a book. I can say that. So
I appreciate you guys having me on, and let me say a couple things here before we go, and I let you guys go. You did a terrific job. I know this is the first one. I know you probably had a little jitters yourself. I think Nick, both of you guys, you were great, and I see only good things for your future for your future podcasts.
Well, I appreciate that, but I give you a lot of credit. You are an easy talking guy. If we were ever in the same city and met for lunch, I'm sure both of us, if we had appointments after lunch, would be late because we would be talking and talking and talking. We're of a similar age. You're only 2 years older than I am.
Okay.
So we share a lot of those same experiences from that era and probably even the same feelings. So it would be nice to get you back on at some point, but I don't know.
I would love to.
Yeah, I don't know what's in the cards for that. But
get a hold of me anytime.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Zach, you got a little Tommy Lasorda in you as well. So you're great at telling stories.
He had a huge influence on me. And when he passed, it took a lot out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to write this book because we've been talking about it for 55 years and now he's gone. So he was really my motivation, my inspiration to put this book together. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud it's my own words, no ghostwriter. I wrote it. My English teacher warned me, he said, I don't want you to take too much English. I like you too much to have to fail you. So, how I wrote a book is a miracle. I do have a relationship with Mr. Kaptain, though. And I mentioned to Dave, he's the only living human being that saw me play high school football. So I appreciate him for that. And I like to pick his brain once in a while and recollect what I did in a few of those games. So he was an old school chum of mine back in the day.
Well, see, just like you did for that kid with the clubhouse, this is just an organic labor of love that, Tommy passed, and it's like, you know what?
Right.
I want to talk about it a little bit because he was a special guy.
That's right.
Hey,
and the other thing, Dave, your guest, Campanis.
Yes, we're going to have Jim Campanis on.
Yeah.
Jim Campanis Jr., I should say. Yes.
Yeah. His grandfather was the man.
Al Campanis. Right.
Yeah. I mean, he signed Clemente,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He signed Clemente. He signed Koufax. I mean, he was a terrific baseball guy. He was Tommy's biggest supporter. And he was the man. I mean, and he was not the GM in '68, but by 1970, Buzzy had left. Fresco Thompson had taken over and gotten sick, eventually passed away. And that's when Al got promoted and became the GM in 1970. But he was a big part of that draft in '68. I mean, he was the architect of that. So give my best to Jimmy and ask him to give my best to his father because I knew him as well. And Al was and his grandmother Bess. They were so kind to me that and again, it's part of that path. Why I'm here.
Yeah.
Why I got to where I'm at. Al had a part in that as well. So I thank him for that. And if you would pass that on for me, I would sure appreciate it.
I certainly will. And I speak for Nick, we really appreciate your time and your generosity and just, the best of everything for you and your sons.
Enjoyed it. And let's do it again.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Nick,
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.